The train station buzzed with the low hum of daily travelers, commuters with briefcases, families lugging suitcases, and the occasional solo wanderer lost in thought. Dr. Ethan Kane sat on a bench, his medical bag resting neatly at his side. His posture was calm, his focus distant, but behind his calm demeanor was a mind trained to handle chaos. The calm didn't last. A roar of laughter echoed across the platform as a group of bikers swaggered into the station. 6 of them, clad in leather jackets with flaming skull insignias, dominated the space. Their boots clanged against the floor, and their voices drowned out every other sound. "Look at this guy," one of them jeered, pointing at Ethan. "Sitting there all neat like he's got somewhere fancy to be." The leader, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a jagged scar running across his temple, stopped in front of Ethan. "Hey, Doc," he said mockingly, eyeing the medical bag. "What's in the bag? Got anything worth sharing?" Ethan's eyes shifted slowly upward, meeting the biker's gaze. "It's just medical equipment," he said, his voice steady. "I suggest you move along." The biker chuckled, nudging the bag with his boot. "How about you let us take a look? For, safety purposes." Ethan's hand moved instinctively, steadying the bag. "That wouldn't be wise," he said, his tone sharpening. Another biker laughed, stepping closer. "What are you going to do about it, Doc? Stitch us to death?" The others howled with laughter, but Ethan didn't react. He simply straightened, his calm demeanor unshaken. "Leave. Now." The leader's smile faded, replaced by a sneer. "Or what?" For a moment, the station seemed to hold its breath. Passengers froze, watching the exchange from a distance. Then the leader reached down and grabbed the bag. Ethan moved faster than anyone expected. His hand shot out, gripping the biker's wrist with precision. The biker yelped as Ethan twisted his arm, forcing him to drop the bag. In one fluid motion, Ethan stood, stepping between the biker and the bag. The leader stumbled back, clutching his arm. "What the hell?" Ethan adjusted his jacket, his eyes locked on the gang. "I'm asking you one last time. Walk away." But they didn't. Instead, they closed in, their laughter replaced by anger. Ethan's shoulders squared and his jaw tightened. For the first time, the calm veneer cracked, revealing the storm underneath. "I warned you," he said, his voice low. What followed was anything but ordinary. As the biker surrounded him, the camera focuses on Ethan's face. He takes a deep breath and says, "You don't know what you've just started." The chapter ends with the leader cracking his knuckles and lunging forward. Ethan's eyes darted between the bikers surrounding him, 6 of them, armed with arrogance and an assumption of dominance. They had no idea what they'd just provoked. His hand hovered protectively over his medical bag, the contents inside more than just tools. They were a connection to a promise, a reminder of why he was here. The leader, Wade, straightened his jacket and rolled his shoulders, stepping closer. "You've got guts, Doc," he said, his voice dripping with mock respect. "But you're in our way, and that's a bad place to be." The bikers moved like a pack of wolves, closing their circle tighter around Ethan. Passengers continued to watch from the edges of the platform, a few recording on their phones, but no one dared step in. Ethan sighed, loosening his stance. "I've been polite. I've asked you to leave. But if you keep this up, you won't like where this goes." The bikers burst into laughter. "Is that supposed to scare us?" one of them sneered. "What are you going to do, stitch us together?" Wade smirked, his scar pulling tight against his cheek. "No one's coming to save you, Doc. You should have kept your head down." As Wade reached for the bag again, Ethan acted. His hand shot out, gripping Wade's wrist in a vice-like grip. With a flick of his arm, he twisted the wrist, forcing Wade to his knees. The sudden movement was swift, surgical, and shockingly precise. The bikers froze. Ethan leaned in close, his voice low and measured. "I'm not some defenseless bystander. Walk away before you regret it." Wade gritted his teeth and yanked his hand back, cradling his wrist as he scrambled to his feet. "You're going to pay for that." One of the other bikers lunged forward, a heavy-set man with a chain dangling from his belt. Ethan sidestepped effortlessly, catching the chain mid-swing and pulling the man off balance. He redirected the momentum, sending the biker crashing into a nearby bench. The station echoed with the sound of the impact, and for the first time the bikers hesitated. Ethan adjusted his stance, his breathing steady. His movements were precise, as though he were calculating every angle, every variable. Passengers whispered among themselves, their fear mingled with awe. "Did you see that?" someone murmured. "Who is he?" another asked. Ethan straightened, his gaze hardening as he looked at the remaining bikers. His mind flashed to a memory. A humid jungle, gunfire echoing in the distance, his hands steady as he worked to save a fellow soldier. Back then, hesitation meant death. He didn't have the luxury of second chances, and that mentality hadn't left him. "You think this is funny?" Wade spat, rubbing his wrist. "Let's see how funny it is when you're on the ground." He signaled to the others. "Get him." The remaining bikers moved in, two flanking Ethan while the others blocked his escape. Wade stayed back, watching with a smirk. Ethan exhaled slowly, his eyes scanning the station. He noted the uneven tiles beneath their feet, the flickering overhead light casting intermittent shadows, and the placement of a steel trash can within arm's reach. The first attacker swung a crowbar. Ethan ducked low, driving his shoulder into the man's midsection and sending him sprawling. He grabbed the crowbar mid-fall, spinning it in his hand as he turned to face the next threat. Another biker charged with a raised fist. Ethan sidestepped, his movements fluid, and used the crowbar to knock the man's feet out from under him. The biker hit the ground hard, groaning in pain. Wade's smirk faltered. Ethan dropped the crowbar, the clang echoing against the platform floor. He stood tall, his expression calm but unyielding. "This doesn't have to go any further," Ethan said, his voice steady. "Walk away." But Wade's pride wouldn't let him. He clenched his fists, his face twisting in anger. "You think you can embarrass us and get away with it?" He reached into his jacket and pulled out a knife. The blade gleamed under the station lights. Ethan's stance shifted subtly, his focus narrowing. "Put it down." "You're in over your head, Doc," Wade snarled. He lunged forward, the knife aimed directly at Ethan's chest. Time slowed. Ethan sidestepped the attack, catching Wade's wrist mid-thrust. With a sharp twist, he disarmed him, sending the knife clattering to the floor. In the same motion, Ethan grabbed Wade by the collar and drove him backward into a column, pinning him in place. Wade struggled, his bravado crumbling. For the first time, there was fear in his eyes. "You made a mistake," Ethan said, his voice low. "But I'm giving you a choice. Take your crew and leave. Or stay and find out what happens next." The tension hung in the air, thick and suffocating. The other bikers hesitated, their confidence shattered. Wade's breathing was ragged, his pride battling with the reality of his situation. The station was silent except for the distant hum of an approaching train. Suddenly, Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket. Keeping one hand on Wade, he retrieved it with the other. The message on the screen made his blood run cold. "They know you're coming. Stop now or people will get hurt." Ethan's grip on Wade tightened as his mind raced. This wasn't just about a group of bikers. This was something much bigger. "I told you," Ethan said, his eyes boring into Wade's. "You don't know what you've started." The train's brakes screeched as it pulled into the station, the sound cutting through the tense silence like a razor. Wade's crew hesitated, exchanging uneasy glances. Their leader, pinned against the column by Ethan's iron grip, squirmed but couldn't break free. Ethan's phone vibrated again, but he ignored it, his focus entirely on Wade. "This is your last chance. Take your men and leave." For a moment, it seemed Wade might listen. His eyes darted to his gang, who were visibly shaken by how quickly their leader had been disarmed. But pride, and something more dangerous, kept him rooted in place. "You think you're untouchable?" Wade spat, his voice shaking with a mix of fury and fear. "You don't know who you're dealing with." Ethan's jaw tightened. "And you don't know who you've messed with." The tension broke like a dam. Wade shoved Ethan back with a sudden burst of energy, freeing himself. He staggered toward his crew, barking orders. "Take him down!" Two bikers surged forward, their confidence bolstered by their leader's shout. Ethan stepped back, his body angled defensively. He had no intention of escalating further, but if they pushed him, he would respond. The first attacker swung a steel pipe toward Ethan's head. Ethan ducked, the pipe whistling harmlessly over him. He countered with a sharp elbow to the man's ribs, sending him crumpling to the ground, gasping for air. The second biker came at him with a wild punch. Ethan sidestepped, grabbing the man's arm and twisting it behind his back in one fluid motion. A yelp of pain followed as Ethan disarmed him of a pocket knife and tossed it harmlessly aside. "Enough!" Ethan's voice boomed, commanding attention. His tone wasn't angry. It was firm, resolute, the voice of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "This stops now." The remaining bikers froze, their earlier bravado replaced by uncertainty. Ethan's calm, calculated movements weren't those of an ordinary man. He didn't just react. He anticipated, controlled, and neutralized with surgical precision. Wade, nursing his wrist and bruised ego, glared at Ethan. "This isn't over." Ethan's eyes locked on Wade's, his voice steady. "Walk away while you can." The hum of the train grew louder as passengers began to disembark. The bikers stepped back, their confidence shaken. But as they retreated, Wade's parting words carried a chilling warning. "You'll regret this." As the bikers disappeared into the crowd, Ethan finally allowed himself to relax, though his senses remained on high alert. He grabbed his medical bag and slung it over his shoulder, the weight of its contents a constant reminder of his mission. He pulled out his phone to check the messages that had interrupted the confrontation. The first message read, "They know you're coming. Stop now, or people will get hurt." The second was even more ominous. "Leave the station immediately. You're being watched." Ethan's eyes scanned the platform. The usual commotion of a train station surrounded him. Families reunited, travelers checking their schedules, but something felt off. A man in a dark jacket lingered near the edge of the crowd, his eyes darting toward Ethan before quickly looking away. Ethan's pulse quickened. Whoever was sending the messages wasn't bluffing. He was being followed. Ethan boarded the train, taking a seat near the rear where he could see the door. The man in the dark jacket followed, sitting several rows ahead but within sight. Ethan kept his composure, his mind running through possible scenarios. Was this man connected to Wade, or was he part of something bigger? The train began to move, its rhythmic clatter filling the air. Ethan's hand rested on his bag, his other hand subtly reaching for his phone. He quickly typed a reply to the unknown sender. "Who are you? What do you want?" The response came almost immediately. "Stay calm. They're after what you're carrying. Don't let them see you panic." Ethan's grip on the bag tightened. His mind raced as he considered the implications. The only people who knew what he was carrying were those directly involved in the mission that had brought him here. Someone had betrayed him. The man in the dark jacket stood suddenly, walking toward the rear of the train. Ethan tensed, readying himself for an attack. But instead of approaching him, the man stopped by the door to the next car and looked back. Their eyes met and the man smirked before disappearing through the door. Ethan didn't hesitate. He grabbed his bag and followed, his footsteps silent but deliberate. The door slid shut behind him as he entered the next car, which was mostly empty. The man stood at the far end, leaning casually against the wall. "Dr. Kane," the man said, his voice low but clear. "We've been expecting you." Ethan stopped a few feet away, his stance calm but ready. "You know who I am. That means you know what I'm capable of. Start talking." The man chuckled, his demeanor infuriatingly relaxed. "Oh, I know exactly what you're capable of. That's why I'm here, to make sure you don't cause any more problems." "Who sent you?" Ethan demanded. The man's smirk faded, replaced by a cold expression. "Let's just say you've attracted the wrong kind of attention. And if you don't hand over the bag, this train ride's going to get a lot messier." Ethan's eyes narrowed as he stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You don't want to test me." The man's hand moved toward his pocket, but Ethan was faster. In one swift motion, he grabbed the man's wrist and slammed him against the wall. The sound echoed through the car, drawing the attention of a nearby conductor. "Don't make me repeat myself," Ethan said, his grip tightening. "Who sent you?" The man's expression shifted to one of panic, but before he could answer, a loud pop echoed from the far end of the car. Ethan turned just in time to see another figure, a second operative, firing a silenced weapon. The muffled pop of the silenced weapon echoed through the train car, and Ethan instinctively dove for cover, pulling the man in the dark jacket down with him. Bullets zipped past, hitting the seats and walls with sharp thuds, sending passengers in the adjacent car screaming and scrambling for safety. Ethan pressed the man against the floor, his voice a sharp whisper. "Who's shooting?" The man, his confidence replaced by terror, stammered, They're here for the bag. Not me. I swear I was just supposed to watch you." Ethan clenched his teeth. Whoever was behind this wasn't taking any chances. The gunfire stopped momentarily, giving Ethan a brief window to act. He grabbed the man's collar and dragged him behind a row of seats for cover. "Stay down and stay quiet," Ethan ordered. Peeking over the seat, he spotted the shooter at the far end of the car, a man dressed in tactical black, his face obscured by a mask. He moved methodically, scanning for his target. Ethan's mind raced. The confined space of the train car worked against him, limiting his movement, but it also meant the shooter had little cover to work with. Ethan reached into his medical bag, pulling out a small surgical mirror. Angling it carefully, he used it to get a better view of the attacker's position without exposing himself. The shooter was closing in, his suppressed pistol raised, his steps deliberate. Ethan spotted an opportunity. A fire extinguisher mounted on the wall just a few feet ahead of the gunman. Ethan grabbed the nearest loose object, a heavy metal thermos left by a passenger, and hurled it toward the gunman. The thermos clanged against the floor, drawing the shooter's attention. As the attacker turned, Ethan lunged forward, grabbing the fire extinguisher and pulling the pin. A cloud of thick white foam erupted, enveloping the shooter and blinding him. Ethan didn't waste a second. He rushed forward, disarming the man with a swift strike to his wrist. The pistol clattered to the floor, and Ethan kicked it out of reach. The attacker swung wildly, his fists cutting through the mist. Ethan ducked under one punch and countered with a precise jab to the man's solar plexus, forcing him to double over. Ethan followed up with a sharp elbow to the side of the head, sending the attacker sprawling to the floor. Ethan crouched beside the fallen shooter, quickly searching his pockets for information. He found a small communication device and a folded piece of paper. Before he could examine them further, the man in the dark jacket, who had cautiously crept closer, spoke up. Is he dead?" the man asked, his voice shaking. "No," Ethan replied curtly, "but he won't be getting up anytime soon." Ethan unfolded the paper, his stomach tightening as he read the brief, chilling note. "Retrieve the bag. Eliminate the target. No witnesses." Ethan glanced at the man in the jacket. "Looks like they weren't planning to leave you alive either." The man's face went pale. "I swear I didn't know. I was just hired to watch you and report back." Ethan grabbed the man by the front of his jacket, pulling him close. "Who hired you?" "I don't know," the man blurted out. "They never told me a name, just said to track you and wait for instructions." Ethan released him, his frustration mounting. Whoever was behind this was several steps ahead, operating with precision and secrecy. But Ethan had been in situations like this before. He wasn't going to let them win. Before Ethan could press further, the train jerked violently, the lights flickering. A voice crackled over the intercom. "Attention passengers, we are experiencing an emergency. Please remain seated and calm while we investigate." Ethan's eyes narrowed. The attackers weren't done. The man in the jacket tugged on Ethan's sleeve. "They're going to keep coming. You have to get off this train." Ethan considered his options. Staying on the train would put the other passengers at risk, but leaving meant exposing himself further to whoever was hunting him. He made his decision quickly. "Fine," Ethan said, "but you're coming with me." "What? Why?" the man stammered. "Because you're the only link I have to whoever's behind this," Ethan replied, "and if you run, I'll find you." The man gulped and nodded reluctantly. Okay. What's the plan?" Ethan scanned the car, spotting an emergency exit near the rear. He grabbed his bag and led the man toward it, keeping low. The train was still moving, but its speed had decreased significantly as it approached a rural crossing. Wait until the last car, Ethan instructed. We jump when the train slows enough. The man looked horrified. Jump? Are you insane? Would you rather stay here and wait for reinforcements? Ethan shot back. The man hesitated, then shook his head. Fine. Let's do it. As the train neared the crossing, Ethan opened the emergency door, the rush of wind and noise nearly deafening. He waited for the right moment, then turned to the man. Go! The man leaped, landing awkwardly in the grass below. Ethan followed, rolling to absorb the impact. The two of them scrambled to their feet and sprinted toward the tree line, putting as much distance between themselves and the train as possible. They stopped in a clearing, both panting heavily. Ethan turned to the man, his expression grim. Start talking, everything you know, now. Before the man could respond, Ethan's phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen, his chest tightening at the new message. You've delayed the inevitable, Doctor. We're coming for you. Ethan's grip tightened on the phone as he looked toward the distant train, its lights disappearing into the night. Whoever was behind this wasn't going to stop, and Ethan knew he'd have to uncover the truth before they caught up. Ethan's boots crunched on the forest floor as he led the way, the man in the dark jacket stumbling behind him. The sound of helicopters grew louder, their searchlights piercing through the dense canopy, sweeping across the treetops. Ethan stayed focused, navigating the terrain with practiced ease. Keep moving, Ethan said, his tone clipped. The man tripped over a root, falling to his knees. I can't, he gasped, his chest heaving. I'm not used to this. Ethan crouched next to him, his voice low but firm. You don't have a choice. If they find us, they won't ask questions. The man nodded reluctantly, pushing himself to his feet. You don't even know my name, he said, his voice shaking. Doesn't matter, Ethan replied. Right now, you're the only thing keeping me one step ahead of them. But if you want me to start caring, start talking. The man hesitated, then blurted, Tyler? My name's Tyler. Ethan studied him for a moment, then stood. All right, Tyler. Let's go. The sound of the helicopters faded briefly, but Ethan knew they weren't gone. They were repositioning. He scanned the area, his mind racing. They needed to find cover, but the forest was sparse, offering little protection from the aerial searchlights. He spotted a small ridge ahead, partially obscured by thick underbrush. This way, he said, motioning for Tyler to follow. As they climbed the ridge, Tyler stumbled again, groaning in frustration. I wasn't supposed to be part of this, he muttered. I was just supposed to watch you, not this. Ethan paused at the top of the ridge, turning to face him. Then why were you carrying a tracker? Tyler's eyes widened. I wasn't. Ethan held up the small device he'd pulled from Tyler's pocket earlier. This was broadcasting my location to them the entire time. Tyler swallowed hard. I didn't know. They must have planted it on me. I swear I didn't. Ethan raised a hand to silence him. Save it. Just don't expect me to trust you. As they moved deeper into the forest, Ethan's thoughts shifted to strategy. Running was only delaying the inevitable. If they were going to survive, they needed to turn the tables. We need to draw them in, Ethan said, his voice measured. Tyler stared at him like he was insane. Draw them in? Are you crazy? They've got guns, helicopters. What do we have? A bag full of scalpels? Ethan ignored the comment, scanning the terrain. He spotted a narrow ravine ahead, its rocky walls offering natural cover. We'll set up there, he said, pointing. Tyler hesitated. What are you planning? Ethan turned to him, his eyes steely. A controlled environment. If they want to find us, we'll make sure it's on our terms. The ravine was dark and damp, the steep walls shielding them from the worst of the helicopter's searchlights. Ethan worked quickly, using the limited tools at his disposal to set up rudimentary traps. Tripwires made from vines, loose rocks positioned to fall at the slightest disturbance. Tyler watched nervously, his hands shaking. You've done this before, haven't you? Ethan didn't look up. Enough to know what works. As he finished setting the last trap, Ethan crouched behind a boulder, motioning for Tyler to do the same. When they come, stay quiet and stay down. Tyler nodded, his face pale. The sound of footsteps echoed through the ravine, accompanied by faint murmurs and the click of weapons being readied. Ethan counted at least 4 operatives moving in formation, their movements methodical. He waited, his breathing steady, as the first operative tripped a wire. A cascade of rocks tumbled down, striking the man and sending him sprawling. The others froze, their flashlights darting around in search of the source. Ethan used the distraction to strike. He moved like a shadow, disarming the nearest operative with a swift, precise motion. Before the man could react, Ethan delivered a sharp blow to the back of his head, rendering him unconscious. The remaining operatives opened fire, their shots echoing through the ravine. Tyler ducked lower, covering his ears. Ethan stayed calm, using the natural cover to outmaneuver them. He flanked the group, taking out another operative with a well-placed strike to the temple. The remaining 2 operatives began to retreat, shouting into their radios for backup. Ethan grabbed the radio from one of the fallen operatives and spoke into it. "Call them off. If they send anyone else, they won't be walking out." There was a pause, followed by a cold, metallic voice. "Dr. Kane, you're only making this harder for yourself." Ethan's grip tightened on the radio. "I'm not the one making this hard. You know what I have, and you know why I'm not stopping?" The voice chuckled. "It's not just about the bag anymore, it's about you. You've become a liability." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then you know what I'm capable of." The radio went silent. Tyler crawled out from behind the boulder, his face pale. "What did they mean? Why are they after you?" Ethan slung his bag over his shoulder, his expression unreadable. "Because I know something they don't want me to." The faint sound of helicopters returned, growing louder. Ethan turned to Tyler. "We need to keep moving." As they disappeared into the trees, a new message buzzed on Ethan's phone. "You can't run forever. Surrender the bag, or watch more people get hurt." Ethan's grip on the phone tightened. He wasn't just running anymore. He was preparing for war. The forest thickened as Ethan and Tyler pushed deeper into the woods. Branches scratched at their clothes, and the damp earth beneath their feet muffled their steps. The distant hum of helicopters had faded, but Ethan knew they weren't safe. Whoever was hunting them wasn't giving up. Tyler stumbled, catching himself on a tree. "How long do we have to keep running?" he asked, his voice shaking. Ethan didn't break stride. "Until they stop, or until we make them stop." Tyler let out a humorless laugh. "That's comforting." Ethan glanced back, his expression hard. "If you have a better idea, now's the time." They stopped in a small clearing, the thick canopy above offering some concealment. Ethan crouched down, rifling through his medical bag. Tyler leaned against a tree, breathing heavily. "You've got to tell me what's in that bag," Tyler said. "They're risking too much for it to just be medical supplies." Ethan didn't respond immediately. He pulled out a small packet of antiseptic wipes and a roll of gauze, tossing them to Tyler. "Clean that scrape," he said, motioning to the blood trickling down Tyler's arm. Tyler hesitated, then took the supplies. "You're avoiding the question." Ethan sat back on his heels, his expression unreadable. "The bag contains the ashes of a soldier I couldn't save. He was my patient, my friend. He made me promise to take him home." Tyler's brow furrowed. "And that's why they're after you?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "There's more. I found something during the mission where he died. A file. Something they didn't want anyone to see." Ethan opened a hidden compartment in the medical bag and pulled out a worn, weathered folder. "This is why they're chasing us," he said, handing it to Tyler. Tyler flipped it open, his eyes scanning the pages. His face paled as he read. This is huge," he whispered. "If this gets out—" "They lose everything," Ethan finished. The file detailed a covert operation gone wrong, an operation funded and executed by the same shadowy organization now hunting Ethan. It wasn't just a failed mission. It was evidence of corruption, betrayal, and war crimes. "Why didn't you destroy it?" Tyler asked. "Because the world deserves to know the truth," Ethan said simply. Before Tyler could respond, a distant shout cut through the forest. Ethan tensed, his eyes scanning the surrounding trees. "They've found us," he said. "Move." The two of them sprinted through the woods, the sound of their pursuers growing louder. Ethan's mind raced. The ravine had slowed them down, but it hadn't stopped them. He needed a new plan. Up ahead, he spotted an abandoned cabin nestled in the trees. It was small and weathered, but it would provide temporary cover. "In there," he said, pointing. They burst through the door, the old wood creaking under their weight. The cabin was bare, with only a broken table and a few scattered chairs. Ethan quickly checked the windows, his instincts honed for survival. "We won't hold them off long in here," Tyler said, his voice tinged with panic. "We won't need to," Ethan replied. He began barricading the door with the broken furniture. "We just need to buy time." Outside, the sound of footsteps drew closer. Shadows flickered against the cabin walls as flashlights cut through the darkness. Ethan crouched near the window, peering out. 4, maybe 5, he said quietly. "Heavily armed. They'll try to breach." Tyler swallowed hard. "And what's your plan?" Ethan glanced at him. "We survive." The first shot shattered the silence, a bullet splintering the doorframe. Tyler yelped, diving for cover. Ethan remained calm, assessing their attackers' positions. He spotted one of them moving toward the side of the cabin, trying to flank them. Ethan grabbed a broken chair leg, its end jagged like a spear. "Stay down," he told Tyler. He slipped out the back door, moving silently through the shadows. The flanker was crouched near the side window, his focus entirely on the cabin. Ethan moved behind him, striking with precision. The man crumpled, unconscious. Back inside, Tyler flinched as another bullet ricocheted off the wall. Ethan slipped in through the rear, holding the attacker's weapon. He handed it to Tyler. "Can you use this?" Tyler stared at it, then shook his head. I've never—" "Point and pull the trigger if you have to," Ethan said. "Stay behind cover." More shots rang out, and Ethan returned fire, his movements deliberate. He wasn't trying to kill. He was trying to disorient and stall. The attackers hesitated, their momentum faltering. Ethan used the pause to grab a flare from his bag. Lighting it, he hurled it through the front window. The sudden burst of red light and smoke sent the attackers scrambling, their formation breaking. "Now's our chance," Ethan said, grabbing Tyler by the arm. "Move." They sprinted into the forest once more, the attackers disoriented but still close behind. Ethan's phone buzzed again, the light from the screen casting an eerie glow in the darkness. He glanced at the message. "You can't run forever, Doctor. Surrender now and no one else has to die." Ethan's jaw tightened. He shoved the phone back into his pocket and pushed Tyler forward. "We're not done yet." Ethan and Tyler ran until their lungs burned, the barking of dogs and shouts of their pursuers closing in. The forest was endless, every step a reminder of how far they'd come and how much further they had to go. But Ethan's focus remained sharp. He wasn't just running. He was leading them into his trap. Up ahead, the terrain sloped into a rocky gorge, its narrow passage providing a natural bottleneck. Ethan stopped, crouching low. "We make our stand here." Tyler's eyes widened. "You're kidding, right? There are too many of them." Ethan's calm voice carried an edge of finality. "We don't have a choice. If they get the file, it's over. For us, and for the truth." As the attackers entered the gorge, Ethan struck. Using the high ground, he dislodged a heavy branch, sending it crashing into their ranks. The chaos gave him a momentary advantage, but the group quickly regrouped. Shots echoed through the gorge, forcing Ethan and Tyler into cover. "Stay low!" Ethan shouted, returning fire with precision. Tyler, clutching the weapon Ethan had given him, trembled. "I can't do this," he cried. Ethan grabbed him by the shoulder. "You can. If you don't, they'll kill us both." Tyler's fear gave way to determination. He peeked over the rocks and fired a wild shot, forcing the attackers to duck. It wasn't perfect, but it bought them time. Ethan's phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen. "This is your last chance. Surrender now." Ethan typed a quick response. "Not a chance." Then he turned to Tyler. You keep them busy. I'll finish this. Tyler nodded, his confidence growing. As he laid down suppressive fire, Ethan moved silently along the ridge, closing in on the group's leader, a man dressed in tactical gear, barking orders into a radio. Ethan tackled the man, their struggle intense but brief. He disarmed him and pinned him against a rock. "Who sent you?" Ethan demanded. The leader smirked. "You already know." Ethan pressed harder. "Why? Why go to these lengths?" The man's smirk faded. "Because the truth you're carrying will burn everything down." "You think the world is ready for that?" Ethan didn't respond. He knocked the man unconscious and grabbed his radio. "Your leader is down. Call off your men, or none of you are leaving this gorge." There was silence, then a curt reply. "Stand down." The attackers retreated, melting into the shadows as quickly as they'd come. The forest grew quiet again, save for the rustle of leaves in the wind. Tyler sank to the ground, exhausted, but alive. "Did we win?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded, though his expression remained grim. "For now." He opened his bag, pulling out the file and examining it one last time. The weight of its contents wasn't just physical. It was the burden of exposing a truth so damning it could shake the foundation of powerful organizations. "What happens now?" Tyler asked. Ethan zipped the bag shut. "We deliver this where it needs to go." Days later, Ethan stood outside a modest office building in Washington, D.C. The file, now securely in the hands of a trusted journalist, would soon become headline news. It was a risk, but Ethan knew it was the only way to honor his promise. Tyler, standing beside him, looked uneasy. "What if they come after us again?" Ethan glanced at him, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Let them. This time, the world will be watching." As they walked away, the weight on Ethan's shoulders felt lighter. He'd kept his promise, to his fallen friend, to the truth, and to himself. Weeks later, the explosive story broke across every major news outlet. The file exposed a network of corruption, war crimes, and betrayal, shaking powerful organizations to their core. Arrests were made, and investigations were launched. But for Ethan, it wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. Far from the spotlight, Ethan watched the chaos unfold from a quiet mountain cabin. He knew the fight wasn't over, but for now he'd done what he set out to do. As he scattered the ashes of his fallen friend at the mountain's peak, he whispered, "You're home now." Ethan's journey was one of resilience, justice, and redemption. He proved that even in the face of overwhelming odds, one person can make a difference. His story reminds us of the importance of standing for what's right, no matter the cost. Ethan Kane's story teaches us the power of resilience and the cost of uncovering the truth. If you enjoyed this journey, hit the like button, share this video with others, and don't forget to subscribe for more gripping stories. What would you have done in Ethan's place? Let us know in the comments below. Until next time, stay courageous and stand for the truth.